Nolan just wanted to feed his kids and enjoy a sunny afternoon. But when two deputies showed up demanding ID at their cookout, they had no idea who they were messing with, an FBI agent trained in civil rights. Crestwood Meadows wasn't anything fancy, just a stretch of green beside a lazy bend in the Ashley River. That's where the Dandridge family showed up like clockwork every other Saturday. Nolan, in a plain white tee and basketball shorts, stood by the grill, carefully flipping ribs with a pair of tongs. He wasn't flashy, didn't need to be. His marinade skills said it all. "Don't let those dry out," Tiana called from the folding table, her gold hoops catching the sunlight as she unwrapped a tray of sweet corn. Nolan smirked without looking up. "When have I ever messed up ribs?" Their daughter Kendra rolled her eyes, pulling her curls into a ponytail as she watched her little brother Jalen lob a frisbee wildly off target and then chased after it like a goalie. "You two better eat today," Tiana warned, pointing a serving spoon at them. "I didn't peel all these potatoes for juice pouches." Kendra plopped into a lawn chair, earbuds in. "You're the one who cooks like she's feeding an army." Tiana laughed it off. "I cook for my family like I love them. Y'all eat like I don't." Nolan chuckled, flipping the ribs again, the grill hissing and popping around them. The afternoon moved slow and easy. No rush, just that South Carolina summer heat pressing down like a warm hand. Kids' laughter drifting across the grass. Other families dotted the park, cousins tossing a football, folks grilling hot dogs near the swings, elders playing dominoes under the pavilion. Nobody loud, nobody causing trouble. Nolan called out, "Jalen, stay where I can see you." "I'm just getting my frisbee," the boy shouted, voice cracking with excitement. "Don't go past the trees." Okay, Jalen waved back. Kendra gave her dad a look, annoyed. "You treat him like he's 5. He's 7. That's close enough," Nolan grinned. There was something comforting in the rhythm of these afternoons. Grill, laugh, eat, clean up, go home. No schedules, no phones, no distractions. Tiana handed Nolan a mason jar of lemonade from the cooler. "Don't let that fire die. You know how long these ribs take." He clinked his cup against hers. "Ain't my first rodeo." "That's why I married you," she teased, slipping a deviled egg into her mouth. Nolan shook his head, smiling. "Woman's been roasting me since '03. That's the kind of family they were. Not perfect, just real. Loud laughs, loud arguments, and love louder still." Nolan had spent the last year buried in work. Long days at the Charleston field office, nights writing reports. So these weekends were sacred. He glanced toward the tree line where Jalen came running back, breathless and proud, frisbee held like a trophy. Kendra muttered, "You didn't catch it, you just picked it up." "I still got it," Jalen declared, collapsing into the grass. Nolan leaned back, cracked his knuckles, looked at Tiana. "Hear that? Our boy's a champion. He better be. He eats like one." They laughed again, the kind of laughter that only comes when you know you're exactly where you're meant to be. Then, a low rumble from the parking lot broke the calm. Tires rolled slowly across gravel, then onto the grass, closer than any car should be. Nolan looked up. "Who's driving on the field?" Tiana followed his gaze. A Charleston County Sheriff's cruiser stopped about 15 yards from the grill. Two deputies stepped out, one adjusting his belt, the other with a hand on his radio. Neither smiling. That's when everything shifted. They walked with slow, deliberate steps, not rushed, not casual, just controlled, like men who already expected trouble. One was tall, pale, late 40s maybe, sharp features, mirrored sunglasses hiding the way he sized up every face. The other was younger, broader, shaved head, expression unreadable. "Afternoon," the older one said, scanning the table, the food, then Nolan. "You folks got a permit for this gathering?" The question hit like a stone in a still pond. Nolan straightened, wiped his hands on a towel, stepped from behind the grill. "We're not hosting an event, sir. Just a family cookout." "Is that right?" the younger officer said, eyeing trays and folding chairs. "Looks like more than a family thing." Tiana stood, instinctively placing a hand on Kendra's shoulder. "It's just us and the kids. No music, no loudspeakers, no crowd. We're here every other weekend." "I didn't ask you," the older one said flatly. Kendra immediately pulled out her earbuds, looked up. Jalen froze mid-bite on his hot dog. Nolan's face stayed calm. He'd been through enough interrogations to read the energy behind the words. "Well, Nolan replied steady. This isn't a public event. Just a meal. Got ID on you? The younger officer asked. Nolan blinked. What? We need to confirm who we're talking to for a barbecue. No answer, just the stare. Tell him. You're not required to provide ID if you're not lawfully detained or suspected of a crime, Nolan said, voice still calm. You aware of that, right? The older officer squinted behind sunglasses. You getting smart with us? Nolan didn't flinch. I'm answering your question. Tiana's fingers tightened on Kendra's shoulder. The air got heavier. The younger officer stepped past Nolan, peered into the foil pans. What's in here? Food. Tiana snapped, stepping forward. That's my potato salad. Please don't touch it. I'm not touching anything, ma'am. Just checking. He pressed a button on his radio. Unit 7, go ahead and run a vehicle check. Black SUV, South Carolina plate 6 Tango 29. Nolan's SUV. Tiana exchanged a look with him, fast, but full of meaning. He nodded slightly. They both saw it. Kendra whispered, Are we in trouble? No, baby. Nolan said softly. We're just fine. But his body was stiff now, legs apart, hands visible, not raised. Not hidden. I'm gonna ask again, the older officer said. Let me see some ID. Nolan inhaled through his nose. What's your reasonable suspicion here? The officer stepped closer. Just shy of too close. You're obstructing. No, sir. I'm standing still. Speaking clearly. Haven't moved. Haven't touched anything. Answered your questions. Not obstructing. Nolan's jaw flexed. His sunglasses reflected his own image, arms at sides, brow furrowed. Not angry, just ready. Kendra stood too, chest tight, fingers trembling. Mom, she whispered quietly. Can they make us leave? Tiana said nothing. The younger deputy walked back to his partner. Plates registered to Nolan Dandridge, Mount Pleasant address. That's me, Nolan said. You sure about that? The older one tapped the name into his tablet. Got anything to prove it? Nolan sighed slightly, reached into his wallet, and pulled out not just a driver's license, but a federal badge and credentials. The older officer blinked, read it, then looked at Nolan slower this time. Special agent, he muttered. You didn't ask. Just doing our jobs, the younger one added. I've heard that line before, Nolan said dryly. Usually when someone gets hurt. They lingered a few seconds, gave awkward nods, then turned and walked back to their car. No citations, no questions, just silence and gravel under boots. Jalen, still holding his hot dog, finally asked, What just happened? Nolan crouched down, eyes level with his son. Nothing you did. But you gotta remember what you saw. Tiana's phone stayed in her hand, screen dim, but recording steady from the start. Faces clear, audio crisp. Someone's speaker crackled with old soul music. But for the Dandridges, everything had changed. Jalen climbed into a folding chair, confused, chewing his lip. Are we still eating? Tiana glanced at the table, ribs cooling under foil. We should. We're still here. But no one reached for a plate. Kendra folded her arms. So that's it. They just show up, mess with us, then drive off? That's how it usually goes. Nolan's eyes stayed fixed on the spot where the car had vanished. Dad, they tried to embarrass you. Talked to Mom like she wasn't even there. She broke off furious. I know what they tried to do, Nolan said, voice low and measured but heavy now. But we didn't give them what they wanted. What did they want? Jalen asked. Nolan looked down at his son, ketchup on his chin, innocence barely intact. They wanted control, Nolan said finally. They expected fear. Kendra shook her head. That's so messed up. Tiana stepped forward, grabbing paper plates, trying to force normal back into the afternoon. Let's eat. We're not going to let them ruin our day. But when she handed a plate to Kendra, the girl didn't take it. I'm not hungry. Jalen picked at corn, slower than before, like even he felt the shift. I shouldn't have to record things like this, Tiana said, mostly to herself. They might have arrested you or worse. Nolan opened his eyes. That's why we stay calm. But why should we? She snapped. Why do we always have to be the ones keeping calm? Why can't they keep calm? Because the rules aren't written for us. Tiana's hand paused midair, reaching for a drink. She looked at Nolan, eyes softening. She knew that weight in his voice came only when he felt trapped. You never talk like that. I mean it, she added. You're always the one telling us to give people the benefit of the doubt. Nolan gave a slow, dry laugh. Yeah, and I still believe that. Then what changed? He looked around at his family, at the table, the park sometimes. Sometimes, he said, you just get tired of watching your kids see things you hope they'd never have to. Silence settled between them again, but this time it wasn't empty. It was full of recognition, shared weight. Tiana finally sat beside him. Well, they saw it, and they're not the same. No, Nolan said. They're not. He looked at Kendra, arms crossed, trying not to let anger show, but it was there, swelling. You did the right thing, he told her. She blinked, surprised. I don't know yet. You gonna post it? Maybe. Jalen looked up from his corn. If people see it, they'll believe you. Nolan raised an eyebrow. And if they don't, then we show them again. Tiana looked at Nolan. He nodded subtly and opened the app, pressed share. What started as a quiet upload soon became a roar. By the time they got home that evening, the sky was soft orange. Cicadas just starting their nightly chatter. No one spoke much on the ride, radio off, Jalen asleep against the window, Kendra scrolling silently. But they came anyway. Watch for yourself. She stared at the leftover food, ribs, deviled eggs barely touched, feeling like they belonged to some other life. Give it an hour, he chuckled bitterly, and sat at the kitchen table staring out the window. Kendra wandered in with her phone. Dad. Yeah, I think it's going viral. He looked up. Already? One of my friends reposted it, and some verified Instagram person shared it on their story. People are stitching, commenting like crazy. Nolan didn't say much, just nodded slowly. Then, didn't threaten them, stayed calm. What's there to be nervous about? He looked at her. This was supposed to be just us, family time. Now it's evidence. Kendra said. Jalen asked why the room got so quiet after you said existing in peace. Nolan closed his eyes. I didn't plan that line. It just came out. That's why it hit, she said. You weren't performing. You were telling the truth. Nolan didn't smile. He leaned forward, elbows on knees, staring at his hands. I got a call before I boarded the plane. From who? Tiana sat up. Director Beeman. Said I'm making waves. The Bureau doesn't take official stands on personal experiences. Reminded me of my oath, confidentiality. She exhaled long and hard. They want you to shut up. They want me to remember who signs my paycheck. Silence fell, heavy and sharp. Tiana finally said, Do you want to stop? Nolan hesitated. It's not about what I want. It's what happens if I keep going. What it means for my team, the cases I lead, my clearance. So it's your job or your voice. He nodded. Not a choice. It's one I've made before, quietly. Let things slide. Focus on the work, not the noise. But now, you're the noise. She looked at him carefully. And part of me hates that. Tiana sat on the edge of the coffee table. He cracked a small grin. They didn't care who you were. You had to flash a badge to be treated like a person. And now you have a platform. You think this is about ego or wanting the spotlight. No, but it asked for us. Nolan leaned back, stared at the ceiling. I've always believed in systems. I still do, honestly. But maybe systems don't change unless the people inside shake them up a little. She raised an eyebrow. Sounds like a man leaning toward doing something big. He chuckled. Or something reckless. She rested her hand on his knee. There's a difference. Next morning, Nolan called in a week of personal leave. First time ever without a family emergency. That afternoon, a local university professor asked if he'd guest speak on systemic bias and accountability. He didn't say yes, didn't say no. He sat on the porch, Jalen curled up beside him reading about planes. Kendra blasting music inside. He watched the neighborhood, the mail truck, a neighbor walking their dog. For once, he wasn't rushing anywhere. I keep thinking, he said aloud. What if that badge hadn't been in my wallet? Jalen looked up. What do you mean? What if they didn't believe me? What if things had gone different? The boy frowned, processing. Would they have taken you away? Nolan didn't answer, just pulled his son close. But deep down Nolan knew this wasn't the end. It was only the beginning. 3 days into his leave, Nolan stood before a packed lecture hall at Charleston Southern University. The room smelled like coffee and dry erase markers. Students shuffled notebooks, waiting. Professor Lindsay Abernathy introduced him. You may know him from recent headlines. Today, he's here to share what it means to work in the system and what it feels like to be failed by it. Nolan took the mic, spoke slowly. I didn't come here to lecture. I'm here to talk about what it feels like when doing everything right still lands you under suspicion. Last Saturday, I was at the park with my family. Nothing loud. No crowd. Just ribs on the grill and my kids tossing a frisbee. Then 2 officers showed up. Murmurs moved through the room. They didn't ask what was going on. They asked for ID. One walked around the table like he was looking for drugs. The other ran my plates. All without cause. He paced slowly. When I asked why, they told me to stop being smart. When I pointed out they had no reason,